Uh, Hello, everybody. We are here with the fifth guest
Yeah,
feature
this is the fifth
of
guest feature.
IndyCast,
Yeah.
and today we have a very exciting set of guests for you. We are hosting today a startup called Jurisphere with two out of three of its co-founders. Jayant, Manas, and Varun, very talented guys. I believe all of you are based in Bengaluru, right? Uh,
No, all over. So
okay.
me and Varun are based out of Mumbai, and Jayant is
All
based out
right.
of Bangalore.
Right. So Jayant is based out of Bangalore. Manas and Varun are based out of Mumbai, and it's a AI legal startup called Jurisphere. And with these guys, I will be having a conversation about the AI startup landscape in India and tech adoption across sectors in general. So without wasting much time, let's just get your thoughts, guys. Why don't you introduce yourselves? Yeah.
Go for it, Jayant.
Hi guys, so it's great to be here. Thank you so much, Raj and Jai, for setting this up and having us. So AI is a very shiny thing, right? Like everybody's talking about AI some way or the other. It's very fun and exciting to be in a place where I am seeing something like AI, something very new and changing, being kind of taken into the legal profession which I come from. So I'm a lawyer by training and I was practicing law as well. But in the last, say, a year or so, I've been kind of getting myself into the AI ecosystem, seeing how India is reacting to it, seeing what's happening around the world. It's been pretty fun, very exciting, lots of things to learn every day. So hopefully I'll learn a little bit more today as well, and the conversations will be fun, I'm sure. Manas?
Yeah, brilliant. So yeah, I'm a commercial co-founder of Jurisphere or AI. While people like Jayant, Varun, Sumit, etc., they make the company thrive. It's my job to make the company survive, basically, for the next step. So yeah, I mean, it's a pretty interesting sort of situation. AI's sort of introduction, what most of us think was during the Chat GPT era in November sort of 22. But actually, I got access to Salesforce's Einstein AI about 4 years back when I was based out of Singapore. And what I saw that it could do to unstructured data. So my brother and I, we started discussing that, the pendency of cases in India, I don't see the infrastructure developing really quickly, but maybe tech could really have an impact out here. And sort of the cornerstone of this sort of company began with Varun and I looking at if we can move the pendency by even 1 minute in India, we've done a job as founders basically. And that's kind of what our focus has been. But it's sort of blown up and it's a very interesting time to be in legal AI, not just in India, but around the world basically.
Right. I feel like so much of AI policy, whether it's at the part of governments or even private sector organizations, AI visions have largely been reactionary. I feel like over the last couple of years, with the advent of like Chat GPT and mainstreaming of generative AI, people really started taking note of it. And I feel like there's almost a direct correlation between the number of AI summits that started happening post the advent of like mainstreaming of Gen AI tools, like into that phase where people were asking GPT to write itself poems and all of that. That's when people realize, okay, this is really getting serious. Like we heard of it like a science fiction movie that one day AI will be able to do complex tasks, and now we are actually seeing AI write you your cover letters and all of that. And with complexity in writing, I would assume that there is a use case for AI in things like drafting and things which are much more required in the legal space. So
Yeah.
how has the adoption of AI been in the legal area since you guys work in the legal techno space? So why don't you guys take that question individually? Whoever wants to start.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think Manas
So
should go for this first. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, for this, let's look at the history, right, of adoption of legal tech products and let's say the law firms and the legal sector in general. It's not been very high. The last decade has had less than $70 million of venture funding for legal tech companies in India. Not a lot have really raised more than sort of gone more on a venture scale. It's been pretty slow and steady, and there's not been a lot of movement. And that typically came from the fact that most of these softwares were centralization softwares. They were made for sort of partners, and the impact in the day-to-day operations was less than 2 to 5% in a lot of cases, right? With AI, what happened fundamentally, the superpower of AI today is that it can read faster than any human being out there. And if you look at a flywheel of a lawyer's work, right? You get your documents, you're going to have to read the documents, and you have to research on them, and then you draft an opinion on them. But that's probably 60 to 80% of what a lawyer does on a day to day basis. AI is actually going after that core competency of what lawyers is, and not the 20% of the frivolous competencies that lawyers basically have. And that's where today, when we are looking at AI products, not just in India, but around the world, the impact that it has at a law firm practice, the impact that it has at a Supreme Court level or a judiciary level or anything else, it's significantly higher, which is why we're seeing that the law firm persona, the law firm buyer, who was pretty much at the end of the adoption curve for anything, well, be it cloud technology, be it a productivity software, be it a CRM if you wanted, right? Those guys are now right at the beginning of this adoption curve that they're really looking at, okay, what can this do to not just like the bottom line and top line, but really sort of make work more meaningful again. And that's kind of where we're at today with Jurisphere. Pretty much we're not doing any outbound reach outs today. Most of the firms are reaching out to us. And that's a sort of strong testament on where the sector has sort of developed towards and where it's going as well. So adoption wise, we're very happy. We're also very lucky that we're at the right space at the right time. But
Yeah,
fundamentally, it's just going to get a deeper and deeper use cases. I mean, today we're probably summarizing a few things, but the future is that end-to-end processes will get completed using these legal workflows, and some of the mundane tasks and the control effing and the grunt work. Potentially, I don't see people doing that in the next 5 years, basically. It changes what it means to be a lawyer.
yeah. So another perspective on this is in legal there is too much of structure, right? So you have your litigation and corporate, that's the first big divide, right? And then you have in-house counsels as well. But even within this, you have your top tier, and then you have your independent practices, and then you have your juniors. The thing is, each part of this kind of works differently, right? Like in the law firms, the corporate law firms work very differently from how a litigation chamber works. So, uh, the COVID pandemic was like the biggest push for litigation to get digitized. Until then, I'm telling you, forget legal tech adoption. Everybody was just using paper briefs. Everything was on paper. Everything. 100%. Right? There were some initiatives, Supreme Court, Delhi, they were like, chalo, let's digitize something. But it was very, very, very low. But because of COVID, there was like a force uh, that made everybody realize that, look, we have to go digital, right? So there was a certain percentage of codes that went online. Some
Mm.
people, like, officers started keeping scanning their
Yeah.
files.
Yeah,
So
in NCLT you had e-filing and then a physical filing separately, and and you
correct,
had to do
correct.
both. You had to do both. It's like, you
Yeah,
can't
yeah,
just like deal with an e-filing, but you have to do
yeah.
physical filing as well. I'm so sorry to interject. Go ahead.
No, no, of
No,
course.
no.
So in Bombay, you still have to do both. Like you have to e-file and physically file.
Yeah.
But in Delhi, thankfully, in the High
Yeah.
Court at least, and the
Yeah.
Supreme Court, you just need to e-file it. But basically, what this means is the context in which AI is coming in is where, after we explain to a lawyer for 15 minutes that, look, this is what it can do, this is what it can do, the first question they ask is, okay, so I scan my document and I upload it, because that's where they're coming from. The concept of having their case files on their cloud or on SharePoint is something that only the top cream a la cream of
Yeah.
lawyers actually, are comfortable with. So
Yeah.
in that context, AI, as Manas said, is a huge transformative piece of technology, right? So it's something very, very new to them. There is a lot of resistance, to be very honest, because honestly, at the end of the day, what we are selling is actually helping them, right? It's not about making their businesses better as such. It's more about getting them home a couple of hours early on a hectic day, right? But this is so much reluctance. There's a lot of people thinking that this will take away my job, or I won't be needed anymore, or oh my god, what do I do?
Yeah, yes. So in my experience, I had the privilege of working at a tier one law firm. I'm not going to take its name, but at my experience over there, what I could say that so I had joined that place in 2022, and this is the time when Chat GPT and all these other AI bots were still like picking up.
They hadn't reached this mainstream appearance that we see today. And a lot of people were scared about this thing where they were thinking ki, A0 wali naukri to puri chali jayegi, you wouldn't need an A0 anymore, because essentially the first level associate's job is to do what a lot of these AI technologies are promising. I mean, of course, that perspective, in my opinion, is a bit luddite. I feel it can also help that A0 a lot more and be a lot more efficient, and be a lot more productive as compared to A0 say in 2015 or 16. Anyway, go ahead.
I mean, yeah, I'll just like to add that, there's a certain degree of threat to all forms of employment as AI tools get more complex, right? So, one key aspect of this discussion is that whether you will be replaced by AI or whether you will be replaced by a human being who knows how to adapt and work with AI. So, I feel like as we become more comfortable with AI, the line of thought lately has been the latter. Like, I think that a lot less resistance with respect to AI has come in. You see that in policy action also. Our own prime minister was in Paris a few days back, co-chairing the AI action summit. MIT is working quite a lot on promoting or sort of handpicking AI initiatives. So I would like to get your guys' perspective on the regulatory landscape in general. Jayant just said that there is still some resistance. So, what are the challenges you guys are facing with respect to like understanding of these issues, the anxiety, maybe within like firms or even litigation lawyers? So,
Yeah.
what's been your experience with respect to resistance, guys?
Yeah, Manas, you want to take the question on resistance, and I'll speak about the regulatory issues.
No, no, fair enough. I mean, I guess there is resistance is just basic change management, right? I mean, it's not really resistance per se if you really sort of go deeper into it. At the end of the day, we've not walked out of any meeting where they were like, oh, this is something is nefarious and we should not use it, basically. It's just making you think a lot more deeper about what you've been doing for the last 25 years, 30 years, 40 years, basically, right? And the question about that, will a A0's job become redundancy, folks? The idea is that there's been step changes. If you look at history, that be it through technology or any other sort of interventions, but the human spirit is very adaptable, right? The what it means to be a lawyer changes. I mean, if fundamentally you said a good lawyer is someone who can read for 8 hours in a stretch, right, without blinking their eyes, maybe in a year or two down the line, what it means to be a good lawyer is not someone who can just sit down and read for 8 hours sort of back to back. Maybe that's someone who can sort of start applying their mind right from day one. If we look at amalgamation of data, right, as the key competency of a lawyer, I'm sorry, tech was already going to do that, right? But it's the more about the advisory part of it. AI cannot write your opinions today. It cannot do your litigation strategy today. So that's the part that I look at it is that the spirit of human beings, I mean, in general, we're very adaptable. And fundamentally, I'm already seeing a new kind of a role pop up in the Western nations, which is called legal engineer. These are lawyers not with a BTech, but these are lawyers who are going to be helping shape the AI platform, helping shape the LLMs basically within a law firm itself. And that's already happened. We're kind of in 2 years into this right now. And it's just going to sort of develop at its own pace, basically. Now, is it disruptive to the current law firm models where you're looking at the short term quarterly gains and stuff like that? 100%. It challenges the whole concept of a sort of a time based business model, right? But even if you kind of look at it, the billing model was already getting challenged with a lot of things getting standardized. This is just a catalyst out there, basically. It's just kind of making move the slightly faster pace. But in general, the resistance is not from a fact that is this good or is this bad? The resistance is from a fact that, oh, this is great. Now, how do I really incorporate this within my chamber, within my firm, and really take advantage of it? And that's where sort of expectation selling, getting folks to adopt AI, getting folks to know what the limitations are. Sort of the biggest challenge with selling AI today is once you try it once, now your sort of imagination is running in 1,000 different directions. It's mostly about really explaining to them that this is what it can do, but more importantly, this is what it can't do today, right? And it's not just with Jurisphere, it's basically around the world. So I would not say resistance is the word for it. I would just say it's a slightly more introspective way of looking at, oh, now what do we exactly do? Because we can incorporate this. How do we incorporate this? How do we make sure our A0s are still getting trained? They still be stronger lawyers 5 years down the line. And these are sort of not questions just in law and every other vertical LLM or vertical sort of AI space that we're looking at. Folks are grappling with these questions, and we are going to get the answers to these questions pretty soon. I mean, in a couple of years, it's mostly going to get a bit more standardized as well, in my opinion. But that's my sort of response on how I look at it. It's not resistance, it's just a slightly more deeper introspection about what it means to be a lawyer. Jayant, you can go on the regulatory aspect if you would like.
Sure. I think Jai has something to chip in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I'm just gonna add to what you just said, Manis. So what I think, what the way I look at it is basically how in the late '90s you had the search engine revolution, and how it was
Exactly.
later on adopted in various businesses, and of course later on the legal practice as well. And accordingly, those search engines were, they were like the genesis for, engines like Manupatra and SEC. So what you're trying to say is that eventually we'll have we'll have a system for such legal tools being incorporated in AI chatbots as well, like in say in like 2 to 3 years, right?
Pretty much, see, think about
Yeah.
like this. The intelligence with regards to LLMs is going to
Mhm.
get commoditized, right? I mean,
Okay.
technically, these things are going to get smarter and smarter and smarter. So, intelligence piece of it, or reasoning piece of it, might get commoditized. But the question is, how are you really able to apply this? That's where the intelligence of the software vendor and the law firm partner or the Supreme Court judge, I mean, that's where it comes in, right? And fundamentally, like I've kind of said, that this is a very unique area that we're in, and this is not going to last for very long. I mean, step changes have happened consistently, and people just develop an ancillary industry around it constantly just to make sure things are sort of progressing on the forward front, right? It's going to happen out here, and unfortunately, the cat's out of the bag, so it has to happen anyway, basically.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm.
So on the regulatory side, India's always been playing catch up, right? I mean, let's take one step back from AI and let's look at, say, intermediaries, for instance, right? So the law in India around intermediary liability is still not settled, right? Like you still have cases being filed in the Delhi High Court mainly for injunction on this, injunction on him, on her, right? So intermediary liability was something that kind of started coming up around 20 years ago, probably to be kinder to the world, say 10 years ago at least, right? But it's still being litigated in India. And there is probably, one set of rules notified under the IT Act that deals with intermediary liability. Uh, it's pretty recent as well. So what we are used to as lawyers in India is kind of working with a particular area of law and seeing the policy evolve around it before the government or before the court steps in and says this is what the framework is, right?
Shreya
So
Singhal.
sorry, go on.
I said Shreya Singhal.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what's going to happen is in the
True.
next 5 years, different people are going to have different internal policies about AI, right? Like firms are going to say that this is how we're going to adopt it. There are going to be certain certificators. There are going to be certain people who say, yes, this is the right practice. Everybody's going to follow some things. There's going to be some dispute. And then the Supreme Court will come in and clarify that, no, this is right, this is wrong. Now, government, please release some set of rules. So that's how it's going to happen. I mean, you act is on time, right? Like, I mean, the way it's actually going to come into force in phases because they have done it in advance and they know that okay, right now there is no immediate threat, so let's do it phase by phase. By the time the EU Act gets completely, applied, it comes into force, there's enough litigation around it, people find the loopholes, that is when India will wake up and say, ha, now I want to notify something.
Yeah, I mean, this is like my fundamental problem, not just with the culture of doing regulation in India. It's a much greater symptom than just tech policy, right? It's the premise where I find government interference in business and the culture of government picking winners or setting directions as wrong. And this is something it's not necessarily even going to work in something as disruptive as AI. Even in the Chinese example, the model that we are all talking about now, DeepSeek, is not necessarily the model that the Chinese government was backing. So it's if some if and that's a country which has a much higher capacity with respect to integrated circuits and GPUs. So even in a culture like that, the government can't pick winners. So I feel like in setting the direction here is going to be all the more complicated. And I spoke about this in one episode that we did on AI policy before this, is that our priority before we can start thinking of having an Indian LLM model should be ensuring like adaptation, or like just AI familiarity building, for the
Yeah,
lack of a better word, you
yeah.
know.
I think it's very important for the policymakers to understand that India is going to be a AI consumer first and an AI developer next, right? Because if they start making laws similar to how the EU has made, it's going to be a waste. Because if you look at the EU Act, it's mainly governing how LLMs are trained, what they're looking at, what you would categorize a LLM as and stuff, right? Now that might not be as relevant for India, right? Uh, I am very happy to see that there's the Delhi High Court case that ANI has filed against OpenAI, right? Because that's attacking the issue of who owns the content, who owns data, public data. I hope that that conversation also leads to the question of who owns data produced by an artificial intelligence, by a Gen AI tool, right? This is not something that's settled anywhere in the world. Is it patentable? Is it copyrightable? So these are the questions that I feel India should be addressing first. And then the question of liability over AI generated content, or if AI says, if AI gives a particular output and a person relies on it, then what's the liability indemnity factor there? I feel these are the questions that should be explored first by us before getting into categorizing, high risk models, low risk models, like what the EU Act is.
On a slightly humorous note, I feel like that's because you mentioned the IP related concerns with AI. Then there will be privacy related concerns on whose models these AI models are being trained on, those kind of things. So I feel like if you do your job right, I see the scope for lawyers increasing. Actually, I don't see a lot of lawyers
Yeah,
going out of work. There's actually a lot more work to do from the
yeah,
policy studying and setting perspective. I just want to add
absolutely.
something. Yeah, something very small. Manas was basically mentioning that there is the resistance with respect to AI adoption is not that heavy. Maybe the way we adopt it is something that can be like embedded differently. I was hearing a podcast of a researcher from Takshila Institution, an institution of phenomenal repute. She embedded herself with a team of the Lucknow police and stayed with them, and understood like a AI based facial recognition tool, and spent some time with the company that developed it. And her findings was that even like the constabulary and the ranks of the Lucknow police, up till that level, who may not be the most like urbane tech savvy demographic of the population, were also not resistant to AI adoption, right? They had their own suggestions with respect to how this AI tool can be more useful for the policemen
Yep.
on the ground, but the resistance wasn't heavy. I feel like a similar application can be made with respect to courts, even like the clerical staff, the judicial clerks. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm just from an overview guessing that the use case will be there. People will make their suggestions. So I feel like it's the I have more sense of optimism with respect to AI adoption in
Yeah,
India.
because the way I see it is that it is just like reducing your workload. Like the job of a, say, a havaldar in a police station, or an SHO, or a court clerk. Like, it is a very very stringent job which requires a lot of time,
And
a lot of
heavy on
dedication,
procedure too.
heavy on procedure. You have to take it into so many nitty-gritties, so many small details, that even if you miss one thing, a lot of your work can, like, just collapse, and, like, suddenly your seniors are like really really angry at you. And so in order to ensure a good stable system which can reduce their workload and can also be reliable, I don't think a lot of people would be resisting that. I think it's like
So
a step in the right direction.
I'll tell you who is to thank for this. So it's Mr. Ambani and Geo for this. I'll give you the example around this basically. So when we were hypothesizing this entire platform, we were like, of course, the corporate folks in the ivory towers in South Bombay, South Delhi will be using this, right? The tier one litigators, they can absolutely understand and use this. But the question was still that can this be done at population scale? Can this go to tier three India, tier four India also? So just to prove a hypothesis, my wife is from Dhanbad in Jharkhand, right?
Oh, we're also
So,
Biharis.
My
oh,
mom was
you're
born in
Yeah,
Dhanbad.
my mom's from Ranchi, bro.
perfect, perfect. So
Yep.
for me, it was just a sort of a point to prove. I mean, I had not gone there to like get anything or do some deal or none of that. Basically, it was just that okay. I know the guys in the Bombays and Delhis of the world will basically end up using it, but will a lawyer in a tier three sort of city in India use it? So I went and I got a meeting with the person leading the Dhanbad Bar Association, basically. And there were like some 60 lawyers who'd come for the presentation, basically, at that moment. And there's a few young lads, I mean, they must have been 25, 30 years old, basically, out there. And they took a link to my app. And till date, I know that they're still using it. This is from August or no, September last year. And I never trained them. I didn't teach them anything, how to upload a document, what question to. I didn't tell them anything about it. They just got access to it and they've just started using it. And the city with the highest sort of 18th most usage which comes on our platform is from Dhanbad, Jharkhand, basically.
Damn.
Right. That is
Yeah.
saying something because that's where it starts getting interesting because the learning curve was not there. It wasn't very steep. I mean, the way I say it is that if you can WhatsApp and you can upload an image on Instagram, that's as much sort of technical prowess you need to use our platform or pretty much any AI platform out there in a degree as well, basically at the app layer. That is where the gold is. That where nobody needs to learn it in depth. There doesn't have to be an engineer who has to guide you constantly. And they just get it. In about 3 days, they were just using it at a very high level. So adoption will happen. It's not very difficult. The whole part about AI, when you said it's going to take away some of the mundane and clerical tasks, it is also the reason is that it is also easy to use as well. And that's kind of where it sort of
Yeah.
skyrockets and sort of goes deeper into the tier twos and tier threes. I mean, if you see what Kisan.ai is doing, very interesting work with the farmers at the moment, right? I know some of the other legal tech companies who've been able to tie up with the police example that you were giving me, like smaller police sort of stations in general, they've gone ahead and tied up with. There's so much work happening on uh, the seed sort of categorization situation that we've looked at that is happening through AI today. I mean, the applications, if anything existed in SaaS, is now also possible through AI and a lot more beyond, basically. And it's just going to happen at population scale, and it's already happening at population scale, basically, right?
Yeah, and even apart from just the regional kind of diversity in it, you mentioned the judicial clerks and the assistants in courts using it, and that's exactly what we're seeing as well because AI as a piece of technology can do a lot of things, right? So when you have a tool that can be used by your clerk to do a translation and by the senior most lawyer to brief an entire judgment, right? That shows the diversity of the technology, and that's what we are seeing. Like we are seeing a lot of people say that, look, I want my clerk to be using this. Give me an additional ID just for the clerk, right? And they are open to this. A lawyer that we were working with a couple of weeks back, she said that she wants her accountants to also be using this because sometimes they're crunching papers and they're going through account statements. This can really help cut down on the time. So it's not just the one legal person of a partner sitting in a law firm, right? It's not just say a lawyer who has to burn the midnight oil to just prepare a list of dates or something. It's everybody. Like there's something in it for everybody. Everybody can have a piece of the cake. And that's how it's actually turning out to be.
Bro, LOD has given me such trauma, bro. It's just- oh
Uh,
God.
This is the place, Jan, that you integrate
Yeah.
Jurisphere.
It's like those words to activate the Winter Soldier. You got like list of dates,
Yeah.
summary, synopsis, interim application, and
Oh
every
my
lawyer
God.
will.
नहीं भाई.
so, you guys already sort of set the ball rolling for what my next question was going to be, and I'm asking this almost like a layperson that there's the legal profession in itself is very diverse, right? You have large scale law firms, you have boutique firms, you have like hardcore litigants. How do you guys sell your platform? What's like, how do you guys do sales? Is there like a discriminatory practice in the sense that maybe you apply a different approach for like bigger firms, and how do you sell it maybe for like somebody in the Raipur Bar Association in Chhattisgarh? So, just take us through that. Excuse me.
No, of course. I mean, it's selling in general, right? I mean, you have to personalize it and contextualize it for the person. Otherwise, what's the difference between me and a credit card salesperson, basically, right? So at the end of the day, I mean, be it whichever persona, you have to kind of understand what are the pain points for them. And the legal community is one where at the end of the day, it's driven a lot through referrals. So if you know someone who's using it, that's half the battle won basically out there. So we try to get our networks done. We try to make sure that the tier one folks are 100% using us consistently because that helps with the network effects down the stream that we would like to go down to in a way. But at the end of the day, it's really about sort of contextualizing it for that use. I mean, we've got 15 different features that we can show them, right? But at the end of the day, what are they concerned about? Is it mostly that, they don't like hiring constantly because they have a bad attrition rate in their firm? So we can sort of position this as a 24/7 assistant that they have, right? Or is it mostly from a fact that they deal, they're international arbitrators and they get like 50,000 pages in one given go? Right? That's a very different kind of a problem that you have. A law firm is looking at, let's say, a tier one law firm could be looking at more from a productivity gain standpoint, right? Being competitive in the market standpoint. So you've got to understand what the person's thesis is, why are they even having a chat with you, basically. And fundamentally, the product will apply, but it's at the end of the day, are you solving the problem that they are facing today or they think they're going to face 6 months down the line? And can you solve for it? So, not discriminatory, it's just you personalize the hell out of your pitch basically and make sure that they get the idea of what your product is doing basically for them.
Yeah, because a lot of times what also happens is, as a lawyer, uh, so this is when I spoke about resistance, right? Like, so as a lawyer, they don't want things to change so much that they become irrelevant, right? So the conversation is kind of like, this is what you're already doing, right? So I know that this is tough for you. How about we make this a little bit easier? Like, can you imagine this helping you?
Right.
Yeah. So
Right.
it different things help different people, right? So when we're talking to a retired judge, for example, okay,
Hmm.
वो बंदा ने सब कुछ देख लिया लाइफ में 30-40 साल में he has seen everything, he has been treated like god, right? And in his retirement, all the big names in that part of the world have come and bid farewell to him. Now, for him, he doesn't care about productivity gains. He's not going to care about how much money is this going to save him, right? For him, the idea is different. I have to go and show him that, look, sir, this is what it's capable of doing. This is how the world is changing, right? This is what you can do now. This is how lawyers can change, right? So that is the kind of approach that we take with him. Now, think about the same approach if I take it with a small chamber lawyer whose majority work is in the district court jurisdiction, where he's just filing things, he's getting a lot of things translated. He doesn't care about changing the world or anything like that. He just wants to make more money. Right? So, I also have to be a little more flexible. I'm not forcing everybody to use the platform the same way. Different people can use it different ways. So it has to slightly be customized, but otherwise we don't really discriminate in the sense that we don't direct what they're focusing on, what they're looking at. We tell them that this is all that's there. अभी तुम use कर लो, चाहे तुम LOD के लिए use कर रहे हो या research के लिए use कर रहे हो, whatever it is.
So that's gonna segue me into the next question, and that is with respect to the infrastructure. Like, so I'm sure you would have some certain server requirements with respect to the data that you're storing, and so that is the physical aspect of it. And how do you balance it with the software? So that
I mean,
is
see,
my next question.
100%. I mean, so I come from a software background. So before Varun and I even sort of started developing this, number one thing was that, hey, man, our customers are going to be banks, regulators, law firms, etc. If it's not secure, it's pointless to even build this because they're not going to touch you, right? That's not going to happen in this sector. So that is why we went very deep into, okay, what are some of the things that we can do which eases the buying process for them and builds the confidence in terms of that, okay, this is the company or this is the platform they can potentially use. So number one, I mean, it was very important for us to get into Microsoft for startups because the Azure sort of instance is something which most law firms are familiar with, right? So if you can give them the similar protocols from a security and privacy standpoint, which they're used to through their SharePoint or their Outlook, that's where this becomes very important that we're a Microsoft for startups organization using that exact same backend. Right? Second aspect is obviously you have to go ahead and get those certifications. So we're already sort of in the process of almost getting our SOC 2 and ISO 27001 because those are international standards which people are sort of familiar with. These law firms themselves are ISO and SOC 2 certified at the end of the day. But thirdly and most importantly out here is that Forget all of these two. They want to buy the software from the people who've been in these sort of environments before. So they want people who've worked in a law firm such as theirs, right? Who understand the nuance of how a security or privacy protocol is run at a law firm. See, unfortunately, it comes down to a little bit of a right to sell as well, right? Do you really have a right to sell to a tier one law firm in India? The thing is, it becomes a lot easier if one of your co-founders has worked in a firm such as that, because then they can really speak the language. They understand the protocol that's already taken. If you can tailor it in a way, and of course, I mean, then you get the question that, oh, will this learn from my data, right? It cannot, not today, basically. That's a continual pre-training is a wholly different. So a lot of education is required around it, but as a company, we've done as much as we can from our end to make sure that we're going to check their security checkbox, which they will have, or security checklist that they will basically have. And of course, I mean, the whole idea out here is that the safe and responsible adoption of AI, we have a lot of checks and balances built into the platform as well, which trigger notifications to partners, which make sure that users are not just getting overtly dependent on it. So these are things that we make sure just to kind of get the persona confident into the system that tech to in logo ne bana liya, but it's the management of the tech and to kind of showcasing it to them in a way or giving them those controls and balances and checks in the platform. That is why it becomes easy to sort of adopt a platform such as this. And to be honest with you, there's no other way also. These are companies deploying it firm wide across 8 or 9 cities. Without these controls, it'll be a very difficult software to manage internally. So that's kind of where, this all of this has to be built, and tech just gets you in the door, man. It's the people and the customer success and how can you really help them visualize what the next year is going to look like with Jurisphere. That's where the retention and customer excellence basically happens.
Okay,
Yeah, that's a very comprehensive answer. I would
Yeah,
no,
yeah, I
but
told you, Manas.
So
Manas
the
is
thing
the
is,
best guy
the
to
thing is,
ask about these things, right? But anything about sales, management, business aspect, he's the
everything,
best
bro,
guy.
everything.
yeah, no, but I said it with such a great sense of admiration, and as an audience hearing Manas, also a lot of satisfaction, because I'm on such a huge steep learning curve on this episode, just learning
Both
from
of
you
us, both
guys.
of us
Yeah.
actually.
you guys are
As
too kind. I'm sure once the record button goes off, we'll have a truthful conversation with that.
no, I assure you that our words will be the same. Uh, uh,
Perfect, perfect.
it just sort of like again, me being the layperson that I am, I want to maybe hypothetically, if I wanted to get into a generative AI startup, maybe in a similar space, not exactly the legal area, but maybe something that wanted to help. Like you spoke about accountants, so maybe like an accounting platform which focuses on Gen AI. What would be like the first set of advice you would give me, like with respect to the regulatory infrastructure, maybe with respect to VC funding, so those kind of things? Like, just take us through that. And I mean,
So yeah, I mean, I think see, one is joining AI startup, another is sort of starting one, right? And if you want to join one today, I would just say apply. There's a supply problem today that most sort of AI companies are facing, because the thing is the rules are not defined yet, man, and everyone is doing everything. I mean, today, if you were to come and let's say even join Jurisphere, you'll be doing every aspect of the company, from a sales, customer success, helping the product develop, because we just need folks at the end of the day, right? And all you need to be is curious, and do you read up about the developments in AI basically? Are you sort of interested enough to read, let's say, 1,000 words every day about AI? And that's all that my expectation is from an employee joining my company today, because we are also learning as this develops. We don't know everything. This is a nascent sort of sector. And trust me, Jayant knows a lot about a lot of things, and than me, and he's joined us 8 months later, basically. Because it's just speed of learning has been a lot more quicker. So one is join. If you want to join, just be curious. And there are n number of opportunities across verticals, across sectors, across companies that you want to go in. You name the sector, and I can tell you at least 15 AI companies in India who are doing fairly well, basically, in that today, right? And they're hiring like crazy. But if you want to start an AI company, fundamentally just get your why correct, right? Not Don't do it for any other reason except your clear why, that why am I doing this? Because what's going to happen is this is a although entrepreneurship is anyways a roller coaster, this is a bit of a higher roller coaster because a step change happens every 5 to 6 to 1 year, basically, 6 months to 1 year. What happened with DeepSeek coming out, it made every AI company rethink their business model and margins, right? So if you're going to found a company in this sector, just have your why very sort of, baked out. That why am I doing this, right? Because it is changing every couple of days, every 3 days, every sort of 2 months. We are looking at a code base again that, guys, now what do we do? Like, what can we do differently today, basically, right? But I think it's the best time to be a part of this, because if we can get through this period, right, where so many new innovations are happening sort of on every sort of couple of fortnights, etc., and you can still stay on top of it and still be able to sell and develop and get your customers, etc. There's something very unique about the situation where every AI founder right now will have the same smile, because it's scary, but it's a lot of fun as well, basically. So at the end of the day, if you're looking to found something, I mean, do it now. Other someone's already built a $10 million company in that, basically.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of ideas as to where I want to, take the career trajectory of mine as a lawyer. Thanks to you guys. Anyway,
I believe Jan wanted to give.
Hopefully, Jurisphere can be a pit stop for you, man. Come join us. So
yeah.
I believe Jan wanted to say something.
Yeah. So another angle of looking at this is also a little scary, is that 5 years later, if you're a lawyer who's completely shielded yourself from AI or from the entire wave of AI that's happening, then you're going to be phased out, right? Whether it's you using AI in your work, or you knowing how AI can be used, or knowing what AI is doing, right? It's going to permeate into everything, right? So you kind of have to, regardless of whether you're getting into the industry or not, you have to be curious about this. You have to kind of learn what is happening. If 70-80% of the law firms are creating an AI committee to oversee acquisition of AI tools, then you at least have to have the humility to be like, okay, this is a real change that's happening, and let me understand what's happening. Let me at least see kya ho raha hai. So after that comes the next step of, okay, I have a few ideas. Do they exist in the market? Is somebody else already doing this? And after that, okay, cool. Let me start off by putting together a team. So it's a step by step thing. But I feel like everybody has to take a look at this. Everybody has to see what's happening.
Yeah, I caught on to the part where you said that it will permeate into everything. I was just wrapping my head around like how the basic Google search has changed in the last few months. That
Yeah.
now it feels weird to not see an AI overview first.
Yeah.
So your basic questions are answered very differently, and this has changed just within the last 12 months, and it has changed fully. That you enter a Google search, and now you have, I think, Gemini, Google's AI tool. It will answer your question first, then you will get
Yeah,
your search results, right?
yeah, and
So
this is a perfect illustration of what Manas said when he said the learning curve is not steep, right? Because now you know that if you just put in a couple of keywords, you an AI answer. But if you ask a question on Google search, like how you would ask somebody else, then it gives you the AI answer,
right,
right? So this
right,
is something you already know. Nobody from Google has come down to teach you that AI search like this is generated by AI. This is not a real person telling it to you. You already know it, right? So it's that is the learning process. Like people are just catching
I
on to
think
it in an instant.
Jayant,
Jayant, your
Jayant,
internet,
yeah,
थोड़ा सा your internet was off, man, so we
fluctuation हो
couldn't
रहा
hear
था.
you.
you broke off a little bit. Can you just repeat
Repeat your
what
point.
you said in the last 20 seconds, maybe?
Yeah, sure. So nobody from Google actually came down to teach you, right? Like how
Okay.
to. Yeah,
Jen,
I don't
Jen,
know where
Jen,
to.
pause. No, it's okay. You can pause. So basically, what he's telling you is that the Google model as well, right? The idea fundamentally comes down to is no one from Google came and said that, hey guys, this is how you ask a question, this is how an answer will come, this is how you click on a link. It just happened, right? There's nothing more than that which is required fundamentally. I mean, if you really think about it, Google, whose a majority of the revenue comes from SEO, right? So comes from a whole aspect of listing when they are rethinking search constantly. Now, the fact that SEO boosted articles may not be the ones which get picked by AI models. What for the last 20 years, all of us have been trying to boost our articles and websites through SEO basically. But if the search engine, if the first place where you search for top restaurants near me, right? If that's not going to be driven by SEO related content, Google is rethinking the way it's going to make money out of this, man. So that's like a very interesting way if you really look at how search changes. I mean, big companies which have built their entire business on, we can get you to rank higher on Google. Now they are saying we can get you to sort of come into the answers of the Gemini portal or the OpenAI portal or the Anthropic portal. Now that's where it's shifting to. Can we make this article sort of the metrics basically which they're going to look at, will this get picked up by an AI chatbot? That's where the market is sort of going to. It's not for SEO sort of related boosts on the getting on the first page of Google. So imagine them, right? I mean, their 1 day's worth of AdSense revenue would be at what level basically, and that's kind of shifting as well. So
That's-
no one's teaching you, no steep learning curve, but a lot of steep implications. And that's where people have to be aware of that when they use this. Also, what all do they need to be cognizant about? And that's where the awareness and education needs to come, basically.
Right.
So my next question is going to be a bit associated with the Digital Protection Act, which was recently implemented. I just want to have an understanding as to how is it affecting your operations and how is it affecting other AI associated companies' operations in in the market.
Right. No, so the DPDP Act kind of replaces an older regime that the IT Act had, right?
Mhm.
So its applicability in that sense is to anybody operating in the digital world, right? So anybody who's collecting data, who's storing data, who's managing data. And this is as simple as storing somebody's name, right? So if somebody comes on Jurisphere, types in their name, logs in through an email ID, I come under the DPDP Act. At least some part of my operations come under the DPDP Act. That being said, its application is quite limited to people like us, right? So it's only as far as how we are storing this data and the privacy checks that we have in storing personally identify the PI information, right? So it's quite limited to that aspect. Uh, but what we do see is that if I go ahead and actually comply with it, which most companies do and we also do, if I comply with it and then I tell a lawyer or I tell somebody that is interested in buying jewelry that look, I have complied with the DPDP Act, then that gives a certain sense of a surety that okay, fine, what these guys are doing is safe. So it's kind of like a gray area there, right? Because it's not a regulation that's actually governing or regulating everything that I'm doing. It's probably covering 5-10% of my operations, but still I have to absolutely comply with it, not just for the regulatory implications but also for the those social implications, if you would say. Like if I go and say, no, we're not really sure if we're complying with the act because it doesn't fully apply to us, then that kind of brings down your legitimacy from the first minute. So that's kind of how the DPDP Act is playing out, right?
I
Uh,
mean, for us, I think, Jen, just to add on, I mean, the DBDB app was a good sort of eye opener. We didn't have a grievance redressal sort of a center already created. So that's something that we're looking at. The cross
yeah,
border sort of implications of where is the data residing. So
correct.
the larger firms already had the mandate that the data has to reside within India. But this is now making us rethink, okay, should we talk to Azure that could we get the Indian instance of the cloud storage basically instead of the ones that we're using, which is shared across different geographies. So it's definitely sparked that interest in us to also now go deeper into this. I mean, we're definitely an India first company, and whatever we can do to create a stronger foundation here, it's started those conversations internally at the founding level. Our advisors, Mr. Shavik Guha, who's Dr. Shavik Guha, who's a professor at NUJS, he's also advising us a lot with regards to he's someone who's a part of Center for Responsible Adoption of AI as well, basically. So he's been giving us a lot of snippets with regards to guys, how do you really go about this to not just get a competitive edge in the market, but at the end of the day, just do the right thing and make sure that everything is compliant with your customers and for the broader sort of AI sector in India. Because my biggest worry is in India, the first AI startup which sort of messes around this sort of area, right? It kills the party for all of us, basically. So I just hope everyone is cognizant of the data that they're holding and the responsibilities that they have. But fundamentally, it's led to some interesting conversations and some advisors have sort of been sort of helping us shape our policies as well internally.
Yeah, I think the biggest debate right now, even with the Western world, with respect to India, is where should the data be stored. So, like
Yeah.
how Manas pointed out, and as the other implications of DPDP, what we can just say that if we store the data in India, and if most of our approach is India centric, till then we're safe. We're basically going into the right direction.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
the question comes
sorry.
down to one. Sorry to
Mhm.
interject, by
Yeah,
No,
the
no, no,
way.
please.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
the data might be held in India, but the
Yeah.
LLM call is happening out of the United States, right?
Yeah,
So,
fair enough.
or whichever else. So now
Yeah.
this is beyond just the cloud storage aspect. So
Mhm.
that's why I mean, one of my biggest sort of kind of, I really hope this happens that our sort of Indic language models or like, sovereign language models that we sort of end up developing become strong enough that it sort of reduces the dependency on the frontier models around the world, basically. Also, and it can be done. I mean, with DeepSeek, we've gotten a sense of it can be done less than $15 million. They've just opened up their weights on the website, and fundamentally, I think there's going to be a combination of where is the data stored and where is the LLM from. I mean, those are the two sort of components also which are going to come up.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, right? When DeepSeek came up, you had the IT minister here also say that India will soon develop an LLM model which is of international standards and competence. And I appreciate the direction on that note. But this must come with a follow up question as to this will lead to some privacy concerns within India, and how do you enforce an internationally standardized LLM model? So you want the prompts basically to come internationally, but you want the data to be stored in India. So there's so much more. You want international competitiveness, but the data storage here. There's a lot more to explore legally, right?
Yeah, but this isn't something new, guys. So I mean, if you really think about it, I mean, under for a lot of banks and insurance companies and hospitals in India, their cloud storage has to be India based, right? At the end of the day, they cannot. I mean, when I was at HubSpot for the last 3 years, whenever I would sell into a bank or a hospital or let's say an insurance company, the data residency has to be in India. But let's say I just move 1 degree left and I'm selling to, let's say, a different sector, it's absolutely permissible. So this is a solved problem. Fundamentally, the question now comes is that where is the LLM call happening for, right? And in that also, then it's mostly about what are the privacy and what are the training policies that the LLM has, etc. So Anthropic is the leading one when it comes to that in a way. But at the end of the day, lot has to get baked out in India very soon because the adoption curve is just through the charts at the moment.
Right.
Absolutely. I'm working in the insurance sector right now. And
Yeah,
what I could tell you about the technological adoption in the place that I'm working in right now is that they're still very, very hesitant in
of course.
the adaptation towards say artificial intelligence, even like wireless technology, because you still see people just use Ethernet connections on their laptops because they're so worried about a data breach. And that honestly affects a lot of operational work in a day-to-day sense, because what happens is that a lot of work that you could have just gotten done through like using other softwares, you cannot get it done because there is a lot of resistance, like in these fields towards these the adaptation towards these technologies. So I get where you're coming from.
No, but I'll tell you this, right? So very interestingly, Vidi Das from Menlo Ventures yesterday, he
Yeah.
posted about how AI is leading a resurgence in cloud technology for
Mhm.
traditional network-based on-premise architecture. So I'll tell you an example.
Okay.
There's a 400-person law firm based out of Mumbai who've just come on board as a customer of our platform, right?
Hmm.
They're more than 100 years old, that firm, and they have never purchased cloud. Everything has been on-prem for them, right?
Okay.
This is the first time because of AI, they've gone ahead and bought a cloud platform. I mean, Microsoft Azure, basically, right?
Hmm.
So, what I'm also trying to tell you is that the product, just the implication in the day to day operations, even if you're sitting at the top level of an insurance firm, you're going to be looking at it from a bottom line perspective, right? And the
Absolutely.
bottom line, it suddenly makes sense because we're not talking about a 2 or 5% sort of change. We're talking about a roughly 30 to 40% change in certain cases, right? That's where it was just very interesting for me that like traditional traditional sort of network architecture, which is like on-premise, etc. Firms are actually for 100 years they've not gone towards cloud, and then suddenly this year they're like, okay, ठीक है, हमें cloud खरीदना है, right? We have to sort of migrate and everything. I could not. No vendor can force you to do that. It's the entire market and the sector which is kind of pulling you into it. No one's
Mhm.
pushing you, but you're getting pulled into this as well, and that's a huge lesson. So the insurance organization that you're working at, please tell me who I can speak to out there. So I'm sure that we could have a discussion out
We'll
there
have
as
this
well about
discussion once the call ends,
adoption.
definitely. Yeah. But yeah, I totally agree. As you guys had mentioned before, that a lot of it also has to deal with the firm specific problems that, like, these individual places feel, and according to that you're able to develop your model, and that's how it's like, more attractive to them to, eventually adapt it in their ecosystem.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
I mean, that's how this 400 member law firm got eventually pulled by the whirlpool of
Yeah, absolutely.
AI revolution.
Yeah, absolutely. It's gonna happen everywhere. Like it's a proper wave. Everyone's gonna do it. If not now, maybe a few months down the line.
No,
But everybody.
I wouldn't say everyone. I mean, the skeptics help sort of shape the industry as well, but the majority, the inflection point has already happened. So now we're just seeing sort of a higher network effect on this. But I would love for like a percentage of the population to not get onto this, because then the step change difference will be much easier to sort of quantify as well. That what happens if you don't use it and what happens if you use it, because that's what I'm very curious about. Like, is this all sort of FOMO and Fugazi that, like, where everyone's just jumping onto this? Or will this really have some implications which make it a long-standing sort of technology in a commercial app level environment like Jurisphere, not at the foundation level? That's obviously going to stick around forever.
right. Just from the scope of our conversation, I've been noting down things that, we are talking about AI and the legal field in general today. If we can, at some point, I feel like if we were to do another episode, we can do AI in financial services, agriculture, policing. So, I mean, there's just so
AI in
much.
the entertainment industry,
Yeah.
man. Like,
Oh,
you've
yeah,
got like
there's
these.
so much
Yeah.
happening. There is
Yes,
so
yes.
much happening.
Like these. If I'm not wrong, there was like this recent development towards videography as well. Like, you can just like put in the requirements that you want to have in your film, and like, AI is gonna generate a whole video, and it's pretty photorealistic. So, I mean, say if a movie company does not want to shoot a scene and it's gonna cost them a lot of money, they can just like, go on the chat bot, list out their requirements, and it's going to generate the video that they expect.
Right. I
Yeah.
mean, having said that, we will generate,
Yeah.
we will have like our conclusion remarks here. So I just wanted to like sort of say that talking to you guys, one thing that's come to my mind is that we all live with this premise that you can't re-educate people, right? You're a lawyer for life. You're an engineer for life. At some point, we stopped like exploring intersections till the point of disruption came, and now you are at least being forced to slightly re-educate yourself with respect to AI. So that's one of the most reassuring things that I feel AI has done. That you're being forced to learn and re-educate yourself a little bit, because AI adaptation in industry is going to involve some amount of, you need to do some prompting. You can just be an English graduate and be damn near close to becoming a prompt engineer. So these classifications are sort of becoming blurred. I find that heartening, honestly. So, the impact on humanity of AI has not been as alarmist as people would say. Rather, we have sort of ended up re-educating and evolving as industrialists, business persons, podcasters. So, and I
No,
mean, I'd
but
like to, yeah,
I would definitely ask you to think even a bit more deeper than that, right? Because think about it like this: if information asymmetry goes away, if someone in tier three has the access to the same information as someone in tier one, if intelligence becomes commoditized, it basically becomes about your application. Fundamentally, what I feel where AI in the long term, where it goes towards is if universal basic income becomes sort of a reality, right? And the digital agents of yours are kind of doing the commercial work, we don't have to work for 12 hours. Like, what are we doing as a human population for like ages, basically, right? We've been working 12 hours, 14 hours. And finally, to be human is to kind of like to have respite and a bunch of other things. This is where it goes towards. Maybe it challenges the notions of capitalism as well. That's another sort of way to look at it. But it's a very interesting journey where suddenly the commercial work can be done through a digital agent, and you probably just have to approve or disapprove, or say no to whatever's getting happen, which opens up time to do things which you were not doing right now, the things that you want to do right now. And that is a much more idealistic and a much more glorified way that I want to look at it. Now, how this really shapes out, I have My guess is as good
Yeah,
as
it's
anyone's, right?
all the more relevant in the law firm field, where we've had so many instances of people complaining about work life balance and not being able to do normal things at all, and just being working all the time, and just not being treated like humans at all. So
So I
eventually,
won't I
yeah,
won't say that, but I mean a good
yeah,
way to put it. This is
hmm,
my co-founder had done a test where he
yeah,
asked like 100 people, 100 lawyers that he knows
yeah,
that if I cut your salary by
yeah,
35%, right,
yeah.
would you still do this? And each and every one of them said no.
Huh.
Apart from Jayant, I don't know anyone who's doing it for the love of law. Basically, Jayant is doing it for the love of law at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's
No,
just
but
one thing
my
you
point
don't.
was different. I was trying to say that, you know work life balance is also important. Like, so if you're able to get the same results that is expected out of you, say on the same salary, not a lesser salary, I mean,
Hmm.
that would be great, right? And I think, if a model, or if an LLM is able to solve that problem, I don't see that as an issue at all.
I
Yeah,
can
you're
I
right.
can guarantee you newer problems will come up for
Of
humans to
course, of
solve.
course.
Yeah, that's true.
So
So
12,
it's
12,
another.
so you will have to work 13 hours a day eventually.
I believe Jayant's been
Yeah,
trying
yeah.
to say something.
Sorry, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jayant, sorry, go for it.
So, something that I saw recently, very, very interesting for me on the same line. So, there are sectors where AI is not really replacing jobs, but it's kind of changing the kind of jobs that are being done, right? Like we discussed legal, but if you look at engineering, right, coding's being made a lot easier because of really good AI models. Similarly, content writing. So, a lot of sectors that are seeing AI really come in and make a big change, right? Not replace work, not replace people, but replace work, right? Uh, the last sector that you will see AI actually replace things are things which are traditionally considered unskilled, or low skilled things.
Mhm.
Things like cooking, things like painting, right? Things like actually fine art, right? Theater. These are things that humans genuinely enjoy, and I am happy to see that these are the last things that AI is actually being able to actually come and take away or do by itself. So when you guys say that, okay, it's going to give me more time to enjoy these things, it's also going to go create more value for people who do these things. So 5 years
Absolutely.
later, a theater artist will be fantastic, right? Because you cannot get an AI to come and give a performance. An actor, right? Right now, there are like, so many actors. You're like, nay, 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 there are too many actors. But soon there will be too many coders because AI is doing a lot of the coding, right? So I am liking the direction in which AI is being developed. It's actually going to make the sad part of human life a little less
A bit
sadder,
more
right?
meaningful.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Or
So
it could be a situation like Her. Have you seen that movie from 2013?
Oh,
yeah,
Yeah, of course.
trust me, I know enough startups trying to solve for loneliness.
Yeah.
It's the largest total addressable market today, basically. So trust me, I know like 100 companies who are trying to just solve for loneliness, and her is a near reality. It's
I
not
don't know.
far away.
yeah.
Exactly.
It's also a lot. Like, it's going to come
Yeah.
to what Manas said about you need to know why you're doing this, right? So we are in law, and we know that okay, this is a part of law that I hate, right? So Jay said he hates making the list of dates. So when he starts using, like, trying to make something in AI, he's going to gravitate towards these
Yeah.
things. So
Yeah.
you'll never see a chef who loves cooking be like, chalo, let me automate this, right?
Yeah.
So that's the kind of idea that's
Yeah.
going to carry also for a few years, and that's quite heartening to see as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think only those aspects of industry that will be the first to be automated are the ones that are mundane tasks that people don't essentially love doing, even in the professions that they are happy to be employed in.
Correct.
There could hypothetically, and I have a bias to keep talking about police. My dad was a cop, and I just keep grab. So, you could be a guy who loves patrolling, who loves being in the uniform, may not love the procedure, the police station, the paperwork that comes with it. So hypothetically, that's a use case. You could love people like maybe you guys who love presenting your idea and love giving AI tech adaptation, but the paperwork and the RFPs and that kind of stuff can always be automated, right? So
Correct.
even within like the art and the humans shifting towards art and respite is slightly of a more radical example, but even in today's day you can always focus on the less mundane aspects of your employment as we
Correct.
speak. uh,
Absolutely.
I think it's time to give
Yeah.
a sort of concluding remarks. But it's been such a
Sorry.
great conversation. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, no,
you're
no,
right.
good.
You're right to laugh.
Yeah.
But it's I've had such a great time learning with you guys. I will keep following whatever you guys do, and
Lovely.
maybe in the near future we will have another conversation, maybe with something very specific related to AI policy.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you start scratching the surface about a conversation and realize how big it really is. So that's
The
where,
iceberg effect, huh?
yeah.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I'll get concluding remarks from all you guys.
No, I think let
Yeah.
Manas and Jayant give their concluding remarks because I think we're one unit. Raj is done, so you guys can go ahead. Uh, yeah.
Go for it, Jayant.
Mm.
Uh, a lot of the talk that I've had in the last 6 months around AI and everything, very, it's been very formal. Okay, like it's all about sticking to the point. But I felt like the last 1 hour has been very relaxing, where I don't really need to think too much about am I saying the right things, as much as do I just agree with what I'm saying, right? So
That's a
it
huge compliment, man. Thank you so much.
so it feels very good to be in that kind of a space where I can just say this is what I've been thinking, right? And this is what I personally feel about this. And I feel like the questions that were asked here, and even otherwise the things that were said, they were all unpredictable to an extent. It's not like I can come sit down and be like, okay, cool, I need to prepare for ABC things, which is very, very good. It's an honest and a raw conversation, and I enjoy having such conversations. So thank you to Raj and Jai for getting me to a space where I can have such nice conversations. Over to you, Manus.
I appreciate it, folks, for calling us on, and it was a pleasure chatting with you both, and also hearing Jayant's uninhibited side as well today, basically. But But no, at the end of the day, I would just say, fundamentally, if you're curious about this, just start reading up about it. There's enough videos, there's enough podcasts, there's enough everything. And if you would just like to consume it, have fun. It's going to be a very, very interesting time. But I would just say, just remain curious because this is I think, one of the deepest and the most impactful in the revolutions that is going to happen in our lifetimes, basically. Hopefully, not. Hopefully, we have something more interesting come up as well. But for the foreseeable future, I think this is going to change possibly every single thing that we know. But yeah, have fun using it, I guess.
Yeah.
Manas, Jayant, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us, and
Yeah, we can stop
we can do
recording and
this.
continue our conversation after that.
Yeah. But it was genuine.